My husband ran off with $180,000 and his mistress. I laughed hard because the bag only had $42 inside and 3 overdue utility bills. I'm Nora Ellison, 36, and I never thought I'd end up married to a man like Grant. From the outside, we looked steady enough. I worked as an accountant, neat and organized in every corner of my life. Grant, on the other hand, was a contractor with a smile that could win anyone over. Friends thought he was charming, neighbors admired his confidence, and even I believed him for years. But underneath the smooth surface, there were cracks I could no longer ignore. His spending was reckless, money disappearing faster than I could balance the books. Nights out turned into excuses, excuses turned into absences, and absences left me lying awake in a quiet house. At first, I told myself it was work stress, long hours, or simple forgetfulness. But the pit in my stomach grew heavier every time he came home late smelling of cologne I didn't wear. One morning, I woke to silence. His side of the bed was cold. The closet was half empty, shirts, pants, shoes gone. The drawers in his office were left open, papers scattered. I rushed to our bank accounts, and my heart should have dropped, but it didn't. He had drained everything we had, nearly $180,000. For a moment, I stood frozen, staring at the numbers on the screen. Then a laugh bubbled out of me, sharp and loud, because I knew something Grant didn't. The bag he thought he ran off with wasn't what he imagined. By noon, word reached me that he had left town with Celeste Marlowe, a 29-year-old who wore red lipstick like a warning sign. I had suspected her name long before I ever saw her face. Late phone calls, receipts for fancy dinners, unexplained gas station stops an hour out of town, it wasn't hard to piece together. Celeste was everything Grant craved, younger, flashy, reckless. She loved the illusion of wealth he painted for her. But illusions crack under pressure. Weeks earlier, I had already moved our real savings into an account under my maiden name. Grant thought he was clever, sneaking into the closet where I kept the bag, but I had replaced it long before. What he carried out the door that morning wasn't a fortune, it was $42 in crumpled bills and 3 overdue utility statements I stuffed inside for good measure. So, while he drove off believing he had stolen a jackpot, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a steady hand. My marriage was gone, my husband had betrayed me, and yet, I felt strangely calm. Because the one thing Grant never understood about me was that I saw through him long before he made his move. And now, I wasn't the one left empty-handed. He was. It started with little things, almost invisible if you weren't looking. Grant's wallet was always light, and yet there were charges I couldn't trace. Gas stations 2 towns over, restaurants I'd never been to, a hotel bill that appeared once and then vanished from the record. He brushed it off every time, making excuses with that easy grin of his, but my mind caught on the pattern. I deal with numbers every day, and numbers don't lie. I began watching him closer, but not in a way he would notice. When he left the room, I checked receipts he tossed in the trash. When he showered, I scrolled through statements before he could delete anything. Every small piece started to fit together, not perfectly, but enough to draw the outline of a secret. It wasn't just thoughtless spending. He was living another life behind my back. I didn't cry when I realized it. My stomach turned, my throat felt tight, but I didn't cry. Instead, I got practical. If Grant could gamble away our future without a second thought, I couldn't let him hold the keys to all we had. Quietly, I began to move the money. At first, just a little. A few hundred here, a few thousand there. Always small enough not to raise alarms, always in places he wouldn't notice. I opened an account under my maiden name, one he wouldn't think to look for, and built it up brick by brick. The more I shifted, the more weight lifted off me. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control. Grant still believed he was the one steering the ship, but I had already taken the wheel. I didn't tell anyone, not even close friends. Secrets like that only stay safe when they stay quiet. Then came the night I knew for sure. I spotted her name on a receipt tucked in his glove compartment when I borrowed his truck. Celeste Marlowe. It was scribbled on the back of a business card from a lounge I'd never been to. Later, I matched the dates on the card with times he told me he was working late. It all clicked into place. The missing money, the lies, the smell that wasn't mine clinging to his shirts, it all belonged to her. That night, lying awake, the ceiling fan circling slow shadows across the room, I accepted the truth. Grant wasn't careless. He wasn't distracted. He was building a life with someone else, and he thought I was too blind to notice. But I wasn't. When I packed the decoy bag, I took my time. I folded the old bills, slipped in overdue statements, and zipped it shut like a gift I couldn't wait for him to open. The real money was already safe, untouchable in my name. Grant thought he was clever, thought he could run off with everything and start fresh. He had no idea I'd already played my hand weeks before he made his move. The betrayal cut deep, yes, but it didn't crush me. It hardened me. I didn't feel grief or heartbreak when I imagined him walking out the door with that bag. What I felt was colder than that, something steady, something sharp. The kind of resolve that comes when you finally stop pretending and see a person for what they really are. Celeste Marlowe was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made sure every eye turned her way. She was younger than me, all glossy hair, sharp heels, and lips painted in colors meant to stand out. She loved gold jewelry that caught the light and dresses that clung like they were made just for her. Luxury wasn't just a taste for her, it was oxygen. She breathed it in, and she expected anyone near her to provide it. Grant had always been drawn to shiny things, and Celeste was as shiny as they came. He promised her a life that didn't exist, spinning tales about success, projects that paid more than they did, and money he could never hold on to. With her, he wasn't a reckless contractor always chasing bills, he was a king with riches waiting to be spent. When he showed her that black duffel bag, she believed every word he told her. He made her think it was the key to the world she wanted. I could picture it without needing to see them. Celeste on his arm, ordering champagne she couldn't pronounce. Grant flashing smiles like a man who had finally won. He probably told her they'd travel, buy a bigger house, live like royalty. For a while, she would eat it up. She wanted the dream so badly she would ignore the holes in his story. But Grant wasn't as hard to follow as he thought. He repeated the same patterns, went back to the same haunts. The bars he liked, the motels he thought were discreet, the old contacts he always leaned on when money ran thin. He wasn't creative, just careless. I didn't need to chase him down. All I had to do was listen, keep my eyes open, and the pieces of their little adventure came to me without effort. I knew which town they ended up in. I even knew the diner they stopped at, because the waitress there happened to be a cousin of a friend. Grant had no idea his world was that small, no idea word could travel back to me so easily. I didn't tell anyone what I learned, not directly. When questions came, I kept my face steady. My family asked how I was holding up. Friends tilted their heads, voices soft, expecting me to crumble. I gave them polite smiles and told them I was fine. They looked at me like I was made of stone, but it wasn't stone. It was control. I wasn't about to fall apart in front of anyone, least of all because of Grant. Every night, I went home to a quiet house and let the calm settle in. The silence didn't bother me. If anything, it gave me space to think, to plan, to breathe without his noise crowding me. I knew where he was, who he was with, what lies he was spinning. And the best part was that he thought I knew nothing. Let him keep believing. It was the only way the game would work. I wasn't in any rush to confront Grant or Celeste. Let them enjoy their fantasy for a while. The longer they believed they had one, the sweeter it would be when everything came apart. My patience wasn't weakness, it was strategy. I knew him too well. He was greedy, impulsive, and careless, and those flaws had always been his undoing. All I had to do was give him enough rope to tangle himself. I met with Victor Harlan one afternoon, an old friend who had practiced law for years. Victor had a calm, deliberate way of speaking that made people trust him. We sat in his office, blinds drawn halfway against the sun. I explained the situation, laying out what Grant had done, what he had taken, and what I wanted to protect. Victor told me divorce and property division were clear paths. He explained how we could freeze certain accounts, reclaim assets, and hold Grant accountable on paper. I listened carefully, nodding as he spoke, but I knew paperwork wouldn't be enough for me. Legal consequences mattered, yes, but my husband had tried to humiliate me, to take everything and run. I didn't just want balance restored. I wanted him to feel the sting of losing in a way he couldn't smooth talk his way out of. When I left Victor's office, I felt steadier. The law would cover the ground beneath me, but my own plan would take care of the rest. I wasn't going to chase after Grant, I was going to let him chase shadows until he collapsed. The first step was securing my future. I split the money I had safeguarded. Some went into a safe investment account, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. Another portion I put aside in cash, tucked away where no one could touch it but me. The freedom in knowing that I was secure, no matter what, gave me strength I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't tied to his mistakes. After that, I started building small traps. Nothing dramatic, just enough to press on his weaknesses. I made sure certain bills were left under his name, ones I knew he'd forget to pay. I let word slip through mutual acquaintances that I was considering selling assets he once bragged about owning, things tied to his image. Grant cared more about appearances than reality, so the idea of losing face would gnaw at him. I didn't have to lift my voice or break into shouting matches. Subtlety was sharper than rage. I knew Grant well enough to predict every move. If he thought there was more money hidden somewhere, he'd chase it blindly. If he thought I was moving on without him, he'd stew in jealousy. His own impulses would drive him straight into walls I didn't even need to build. I kept my composure, smiling when people asked how I was, keeping my tone steady when lawyers called. On the surface, I looked calm, maybe even detached. But beneath it, every step was measured, every move chosen. Grant believed he had stripped me bare. He didn't realize he had only set the stage for his own ruin. Grant had promised her the world, but the shine wore off fast. Celeste had pictured hotels, new clothes, weekends in places she could show off. Instead, she found herself staring at a half-empty bag with a few crumpled bills and papers that meant nothing. At first, she thought it was a mistake, that maybe he had hidden the rest somewhere else. But when days passed and the money didn't appear, her smile faded. She started questioning him, her voice sharp, no longer sweet. "You told me there was a fortune," she said. "Where is it? Where's the rest?" Grant tried to bluff, claiming it was tied up in accounts, or that he had more coming in from jobs. But lies don't feed hunger, and excuses don't cover bills. Celeste wasn't built for waiting. She wanted luxury, and she wanted it now. They burned through what little there was. Meals out, gas for his truck, a few nights in motels that weren't as nice as she had hoped, all of it drained what they had left. Soon enough, the $40-some disappeared, and reality crept in. Celeste grew restless, snapping at him for every small thing. She wanted to know where the grand promises had gone. He didn't have an answer that could hold her. Desperate, Grant turned to old friends, the kind of men who once admired his boldness. He called them up, asked for loans, tried to spin tales of big paydays just around the corner. But word traveled faster than he expected. They had heard whispers about him leaving me, about the money gone missing, about Celeste on his arm. No one trusted him anymore. Doors that once opened easily now stayed shut. Every rejection chipped away at him. He came home to Celeste's complaints, her demands, her threats to leave if he didn't fix things. The fights grew louder, spilling out of cheap motel walls where neighbors shook their heads. He raised his voice, she raised hers higher, and the fantasy they had built together cracked apart piece by piece. Back in my quiet home, I didn't have to see it to know. The news reached me in small, casual ways. A friend mentioned running into someone who had seen them arguing in a parking lot. Another said they had spotted Celeste storming out of a diner, Grant chasing after her, face red with anger. None of them told me directly, but the whispers found their way to me, each one confirming what I already expected. I pictured him with his charm worn thin, no money left to back his stories, and a mistress who realized she had bought into an empty dream. I didn't smile when I heard it, not outwardly, but inside I felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing I hadn't needed to lift a finger. Grant was undoing himself. The rope I gave him was already tightening, and all I had to do was wait for him to finish the job. He showed up without warning, pounding on the door so hard the frame shook. When I opened it, Grant stormed past me like he still lived there, face red, fists tight. His voice came out sharp and ragged. "Where is it, Nora? Don't play dumb with me. I know you're hiding the rest of the money." I stood still, arms folded, watching him pace through the living room like a caged animal. "The rest of the money?" I asked, keeping my tone light, almost confused. "You mean the bag you stole?" He spun toward me, eyes wild. "Don't you start. That was supposed to be ours." 180 grand. Don't act like I don't know you. You moved it somewhere. Now tell me where it is. I tilted my head, letting silence stretch just long enough to push his nerves. Grant, I think you've lost your mind. You broke into your own house and ran off with bills and pocket change, and you're blaming me for it. His jaw clenched. He looked at me like he could tear the truth straight out of me. You've always been selfish. Controlling. Acting like you're smarter than me, holding the money over my head. You think you can play games and leave me out in the cold? The words spilled from him, years of bitterness he had been hiding behind charm. He ranted about how he worked harder, how he deserved more, how I never gave him credit. It wasn't about love anymore, it was about power, about control he thought he was owed. I didn't raise my voice. I just let him talk, every sentence digging his hole deeper. When he finally stopped, chest heaving, waiting for me to crack, I stepped closer. My voice was calm, cutting through his rage like glass. I've always known about Celeste, I said. His face shifted in an instant. The color drained from it, then rushed back hotter than before. You don't know what you're talking about, he barked, but his eyes gave him away. Oh, I do, I answered. I knew long before you packed your little bag and ran off. You thought you were clever, sneaking around like a teenager. But I've seen every receipt, every lie. You were never as good at hiding as you thought. For the first time since he barged in, he had no words. His mouth opened, closed, then twisted into something ugly. He muttered curses, low and bitter, but the fight in him wavered. He realized I wasn't scared, wasn't begging, wasn't about to hand over a dime. I pointed to the door. You took what you thought was yours, Grant. That's all you're getting. Now get out. He glared, his pride stung, but he had no ground left to stand on. Slowly, with one last look meant to scare me, he walked out. The door shut behind him with a heavy thud, and the house fell back into silence. This time, it was my silence, not his, and I wasn't about to give it back. Celeste had signed up for a fantasy, and she finally saw the truth of it. There was no fortune waiting, no new life built on easy money. Grant had sold her a lie, and she wasn't the type to forgive. She started by shouting, accusing him of tricking her, of wasting her time. He shouted back, blaming her for being ungrateful, for spending too quickly. Their words turned sharp enough to cut, and soon they were shouting loud enough for walls and neighbors to hear. The spiral only worsened. He tried to patch things with charm, the same charm that once pulled her in, but it no longer worked. Celeste had grown tired of empty promises. When the bag came up again, when she realized it would never hold what he claimed, her patience snapped. She wanted out, but not before bleeding him for every last bit. She drained what little he still had, selling off his tools behind his back, pocketing cash when he wasn't looking, even pawning gifts he had given her. Grant caught on too late. By the time he noticed, her bags were already packed. One night she walked out, leaving him yelling after her in the parking lot of the shabby motel they had been calling home. She didn't look back. With her gone, his world shrank down to nothing. He was broke, alone, and cornered by his own mistakes. That was when he turned back to me. He showed up again, not angry this time but pitiful, standing at my door like a lost dog. His voice shook, softer than I'd ever heard it. Nora, we had a life together, he said, eyes darting like he couldn't bear to hold mine. You can't just throw it all away. We built something. Doesn't that mean anything to you? He tried to sound broken, like the man I once knew, like maybe I would reach into the past and forgive him. He talked about the years we spent, the house we bought, the memories we shared. He painted himself as a man who had made a mistake but was still worth saving. But his act didn't move me. Every word felt hollow, like he was rehearsing lines he didn't believe himself. I had seen too much, heard too much, lost too much because of him. I stood steady, my arms folded, and let him finish. When he finally paused, waiting for some sign of sympathy, I gave him none. My face didn't soften, my voice didn't waver. You chose your life, Grant, I said. You chose her. You chose lies. Now you get to live with what's left. The look in his eyes told me he had hoped for a different answer. For once, he had no reply. He turned away, shoulders slumped, and walked back down the path alone. I didn't call after him. I didn't open the door again. I let the silence close around me, firm and final. Whatever story he tried to tell me about us was nothing but smoke, and I was done breathing it in. Victor moved quickly once I gave him the word. Papers were drawn, signatures collected, filings sent through the court. The divorce moved along without hesitation. With his guidance, I secured every piece of ground under me, accounts, property, and legal protections that Grant could never touch. Step by step, the ties between us were cut clean. What had once bound me now no longer held any weight. But I didn't stop at the paperwork. Revenge, for me, wasn't about shouting or chasing him down. It was about letting him trip over his own nature. Grant's greed had always been bigger than his sense. I knew if I stood back and didn't interfere, he'd find ways to ruin himself far better than I ever could. Whispers reached me in quiet ways, the same as before. A neighbor mentioned seeing him talking to men in dark trucks outside a bar. Another said he was asking around for quick cash, no questions asked. Then came the murmurs that he had taken loans from people no bank would ever employ, men who expected repayment with more than interest. The image fit him perfectly, always chasing fast fixes, never stopping to think about the cost. While he stumbled deeper into that pit, I built something steadier for myself. Small luxuries first, a new set of curtains, shoes I had once felt guilty buying, a dinner at a restaurant where I didn't glance at the price column. Then came the bigger changes. I painted the walls in rooms that had long gone dull. I repaired the garden fence he always promised to fix but never did. Each nail, each stroke of paint felt like reclaiming pieces of myself he had tried to bury. The house grew brighter, lighter. It no longer felt like the stage where we acted out a strained marriage. It became mine, shaped by my choices, my hands. I even started setting aside time for things I had once pushed aside, reading by the window at dusk, learning a new recipe without anyone complaining about it. Independence wasn't just financial. It was in the freedom to move, to decide, to breathe without asking permission. I didn't gloat when I heard about his troubles. I didn't need to. The satisfaction was quieter than that. It lived in the knowledge that every loan he took, every argument he sparked, every door that shut in his face was the product of his own doing. He had gambled everything on lies and found himself surrounded by people who wanted more from him than he could ever give. Meanwhile, I woke each morning in a space that felt safe, steady, and mine alone. My future stretched out, not tied to his chaos but shaped by my own choices. I had no reason to look back. The life he tried to steal was gone from his reach forever, and the life I was building grew stronger with every passing day. By the time he came back to my door, Grant was a shadow of himself. His clothes hung loose, his hair unkempt, and his eyes had the sunken look of a man who hadn't slept in weeks. The fire that once burned so hot in his anger was gone, replaced by something weaker, desperation. He knocked softer this time, no pounding, no shouting, just a tired hand against the wood. When I opened it, he stood there trembling slightly, like the weight of the air was too much to hold. "Nora," he started, his voice rough, "I don't know where else to go." I didn't answer right away. I watched him shift on his feet, waiting for me to pull him inside. When I didn't, he pushed on. "Everything's gone. Celeste, the money, the jobs. Nobody will lend me a dime, nobody trusts me. I'm drowning here. Please, just help me get back on my feet. You and me, we had a life, remember?" The words came out cracked, like he couldn't even believe them himself. He leaned on memories as if they were currency, trying to buy his way back into safety with stories of a past he had already destroyed. I stepped out far enough to stand in front of him, arms crossed. My voice stayed steady. "You think I don't remember our life? I remember all of it. The lies. The late nights. The way you looked at me like I was just a safety net while you chased whatever shiny thing caught your eye. That's the life you're asking me to save." He shook his head, trying to smile like he could soften the edges. "I made mistakes, I know. But I can change. I just need one more chance. I can't do this without you." His words were hollow. They were the same lines he had used before, recycled promises that never held weight. I had believed them once, but not now. I leaned closer, keeping my eyes locked on his. "I never trusted you, Grant. Not really. Even when I wanted to, I knew better. And you proved me right every time. You don't deserve saving, not from me. Everything falling apart, that's yours to carry, not mine." For a moment, He looked like he might argue. His lips parted, his chest rose, but nothing came out. The silence stretched between us, heavy, final. His shoulders sagged, and the fight drained completely from him. He lowered his head, turned, and walked down the path without another word. Each step looked heavier than the last, like the ground itself wanted to pull him under. I didn't watch him go all the way. I closed the door before he reached the street, the lock clicking into place with a sound that felt like the end. He had wanted pity, forgiveness, a lifeline. What he got was the truth, and the truth left him broken. The weeks after that final meeting moved quietly, and for the first time in years, the quiet felt good. I no longer flinched at the sound of footsteps outside, no longer braced for another fight or another lie. The storm had passed, and I was still standing. More than standing, I was free. I sat down with Victor again and went over my finances carefully. The money I had set aside was more than just a safety net now, it was a chance to build the life I wanted. I invested most of it in steady places, the kind that promised growth without risk. A portion I kept in savings, ready to use when the right opportunity came. For once, I wasn't guarding money out of fear but shaping it with intent. One dream I had carried quietly for years was owning a small cabin near the lake. A place where the air was clear, the water steady, and no one's voice echoed but my own. Grant had always brushed the idea off, saying it was impractical, too simple, not worth the cost. But I had never let it go. With my own money in my own hands, I finally made it real. The cabin wasn't extravagant. It had a narrow porch, wide windows, and just enough space for what I needed. When I stepped inside the first time, the wooden floor creaked under my weight, and I smiled because it was mine, every beam, every nail, every inch untouched by his shadow. I filled it slowly, choosing pieces that matched me. A chair by the window, shelves lined with books I had put off reading, a small table for meals I could enjoy without complaint. On the porch, I set up a chair facing the water, where mornings stretched long and peaceful. That first morning there, I brewed coffee, wrapped my hands around the warm mug, and sat outside watching the lake catch the light. The air was cool, the world quiet except for the rustle of trees and the soft lap of water against the shore. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing against me. Only calm, only space. I thought of Grant then, not with longing or sorrow, but with a sharp sense of satisfaction. He had believed he was clever, that he could take everything and leave me with nothing. He had imagined himself stepping into a new life while I was left behind. The reality was the opposite. He was out there, ruined by his own hands, and I was here, stronger than before, sipping coffee in the place I had always wanted. The memory of that morning he left still made me laugh. Him rushing out with the bag, convinced he had taken it all, while inside it sat nothing but scraps. He had run off thinking he won, but the truth had always been clear. The joke wasn't on me. The joke was on him.